Uh, if you're here this morning, you already know Brother Steve, as he has shared with us here. This is the nuts and bolts session of looking at just how it is that churches get planted. And I'll be at the back here, Steve, making sure that people that can get their stuff when they come in. Steve, let's just be clear from the front. If they have substantive questions anytime, or do you want to save the substantive ones for the end?
After every section, there's a question time.
Okay, so after each one of these sections, then you can ask your questions. Yeah. So we will save those for the future. And for the sake of the recording, well, we'll see how we go. If we, I may need to pass a mic around so that
I think
people,
that's best for
that
recording,
can be listening to that. Let's bow our heads. Let's have a word of prayer, and let's get started. Father in heaven, it's a beautiful Sabbath day. We thank you, Lord, that that applies to not just outside, but inside here too. We thank you, Lord, for the gift of ministry, and particularly, Lord, being able to minister to others in new ways, Lord, that new people might be reached for you. I pray, Lord, that you would send your Spirit, that you would speak through Steve now, that you would give us all your understanding, and that your will would be done as a result of our time here together. We pray this in your name. Amen. Amen.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming out. Again, if you didn't get a handout there in the back pew there, this is 10 steps to starting healthy churches. And what we're going to be talking about today is exactly that. When we're planting, you can plant a lot of different kinds of churches, and there's not one way to plant. You know, they've been planting churches way before we developed this process. But what this is principles to develop a church with a healthy mindset so that they are very strong, missional, and they multiply. And so we're going to go through the 10 different steps. Each step, as mentioned before, you're going to have an opportunity to ask questions at the end of each step. So if you have a question right in the middle while I'm talking, just jot it down on your notes, and that way you can remember. We don't have a lot of time. I just did this in Texas. It took 9 hours. Did this with our conference. It took 8 hours. We're condensing this way down. So we're going to go as rapid as we can to make sure you still get the good information. But if your church and this region wants the full deal, all you have to do is invite me. We'll come on a Sunday, and we will go through this much slower in a lot of detail, and we actually break you up in groups, and you do some questions and answers together as groups afterwards. And that takes, again, about 9 hours, 8 to 9 hours. So we're happy to do that for you as well in the future if that's something you want. But we want to at least give you an introduction to it, and this way you can see if it's something you would like to have. We plant for a lot of reasons, but especially these reasons. We plant because this is God's design. It's the design you see in the book of Acts. It's a design you see, of course, in Ellen White's writings, Jan Andrews, James White, the list goes on and on. The founders of our church, they talk about it all the time. We plant because this is our calling as Seventh-day Adventists. We plant because this is actually the most effective method of evangelism. Not just the Adventist church, but other Christian denominations have found that when they are planting churches, they are growing. When they're planting churches, they are growing. When they're not, they're not. Even when they try many other forms of evangelism. That doesn't mean that other forms of evangelism aren't also very important and needed as well. And we plant because it is also the most effective way to build leaders. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go on. So, again, I just want to let you know that everything I do is found on this website. It's free. This is Church Planters Exchange, CP Exchange. The General Conference built this for us so that we could have a place to put every bit of information about church planting we could get on there. And so you have to register with your email just so that we don't get a lot of spam that fills up the thing. But very simple to search. It's not a high-tech website. It's more of just a landing space for files, but But you can even ask questions on that website if you want, and church planters from around the world can answer you. So that's available to you. This presentation is one of the things on there. So let's get started in these 10 steps. And I want to just tell you a little bit how this was developed. I make a lot of mistakes. That's how this was developed. I've been church planting for over 20 years, and every time you start a new church, you run into an issue because you made a mistake as a leader. And I really believe leadership has a lot to do with how a church is shaped. I don't know if that's me or is that me? Okay. No idea what it's doing. So anyway, the one good thing that I think God has given me is I hate to make mistakes. So I analyze. What could we have done different? And so the next churches, we applied the different strategies, and eventually we came up with a formula that has been helpful. This has been tested by churches around the world now. We've been using this in Brazil for 5 years. In North America, I've been using it for about 16 years. We've tried it in Dominican Republic, a couple of Eastern European countries, and I can't remember, Australia, different places like that. So we've seen a lot of encouraging results. But again, they're principles. We're not trying to create identical church plants. And you'll understand why once you see step 1. So I want to share with you just kind of a sample timeline of what it looks like when I plant. Doesn't mean this has to be your timeline. These numbers, 1 to 5 months, 2 to 4 months, they're not cumulative. That's how long it takes approximately for that step when I'm doing a plant. So our first 4 steps takes me about a month and a half. That usually takes most planters about 3 to 4 months. Just happens to be one of the things that I know how to do quickly. Then building a team will take 2 to 4 months. Developing it, training a team will take another 5 to 7 months. And then launching your first service. So it can take anywhere from 9 to 14 months to get a very healthy church from inception, thinking about doing it, to actually launched. And then step 10 is what happens after you do that. I do a reaping series, part of my evangelism cycle, 3 months after launch. I launch my small groups. We're already doing one during the training, but we launch them church-wide a month after that. And then we try and start the next church 1 to 4 years after we launch this one. So we're creating a movement again, not just planting a church. So let's jump into step 1. Step 1 is understanding a new community. By the way, is there a way I should have grabbed one to get a water bottle of some sort? Yeah, I mean, I don't need it right away. Just sometime I will, because so when we're starting a new church, we have to remember that we're not trying to start a church just to move Adventists from one place to another. That's not what Jesus called us to do. That's not missional. That's just moving sheep from one pen to another. We're called to, like Jesus talked about, go find lost sheep as well. So certainly we're going to have Adventists move when we start a church. But we need to find ways that we're reaching other people too. And so we need to understand the community that we're moving into before we actually plant a church in that community. I found that many church plants forget this is a vital first step. Do you know the community? What are their needs? What are the things that make them tick? And we need to start focusing more and more on the harvest, on the people that we're here to reach, and not spend all of our energy on the people who are already going to heaven. We need to find ways to make an impact in lives of people who are not headed that direction. So Jesus tells us that we're supposed to be doing this. Also, you find that most Adventists have no close friendships outside the church. We've become a culture. If you know that a lot of Jewish people, and I don't know about this church, this may be totally opposite. I know no idea what goes on in this church. But just in general, a lot of Adventists don't have friends outside the church. And the Jewish religion became a culture. And we've got to be aware that we don't just become a culture, that we're culturally Adventist, but that we're missionally Adventist. And that's different. Most Adventists don't even try to make new friends outside the church. And then our church's ministries focus primarily on the already saved versus the lost that Jesus sought. When we have this kind of consumer mentality, inward-focused church, you're not going to have a lot of growth. That's just the normal, a lot of growth. That's just the normal, a normal exception is, once in a while you'll have maybe a institutional church that'll grow with these things, but that's because they're bringing in huge numbers of employees and the such. But rarely do you see churches that will thrive if they stay focused on themselves alone. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So we need to do what Jesus did. And for me, this is my favorite quote from Ellen White, maybe yours as well. She says that Christ's method, what? Christ's method alone will give true success in reaching the people. The Savior mingled with people as one who desired their good. He showed sympathy for them, ministered to their needs, and won their confidence. And then what's that next word? Then he invited them, follow me. And what's happened in a lot of evangelism in the Western countries is we flip this order around. We just start with, hey, come follow Jesus right now. We want you, and it works sometimes. I came in through an evangelistic series, so it works sometimes. But for many people, it's not a pathway to reach them. We mail out evangelism pamphlets, which you should still do, hand out books, which we still do, search for Bible studies. We should do all those things, but it reaches a very small segment of people who are open to receive that type of thing. Whereas if we follow Christ's method, the first thing we do is begin to get to know people, begin to build relationships, mingle with them, let them know we care about who they are and the needs that they face, that we are there to minister to them. And then win their confidence. When people know that you care about them, when they see the love of Christ in us through our words and our deeds and the results that we have in our community, then we win that confidence. And they're much more likely to want to follow Jesus. Does that make sense? All right. So, understanding a new community, we have two different handouts here you can look at right now. First one is the 10 steps. This is just the overview of what we're going to go over. All 10 steps is on this one. And you see that we're on step 1, understanding your community. And we're talking about that in detail. This one you can just refer back to if you want to stay current on the steps. But this next one is actually the process that I use. Use your own process. You don't have to use mine. But I use these 9 different S's to find a way into the community, understand the community, so I can mingle with them and get to know them very well. But the first step, I'm not going to go through all those. You can do those on your own. Oops. First step is, I don't know why the slide's not on there, but it's the surveys. That surveys is, for me, 85% of what I do when I get to learn about a community is surveys. But it's not surveys like you might be used to. I don't take a clipboard. Please don't be that person who walks at people with a clipboard. Well, I mean, what do you do when somebody comes at you with a clipboard, right? Yeah, you don't want that. And so don't be that person. I have a very simple survey. It's in my head, and it's only 3 questions. And usually I'm only asking 2 of the questions. First question is this, is what are the greatest needs in the community? I just want to know what does this community need more than anything else? What is their perception of that? Now, we know that they need Jesus, but we're using Christ's method alone to get there, right? Getting to know them, meeting their needs, understanding those things, building confidence so that we can bring them to Christ. So what is the felt needs that they most perceive? Number 2, if they give you a decent answer, I mean, I've had people tell me, we need more speed bumps for these speeding kids that are running around these neighborhoods. That's not something I'm going to probably, make as my number 1 platform for a new church. But there's some really good stuff that's out there that we don't know usually unless we spend time. So we find out what the need is. Then we ask 2, do you know anybody who's meeting that need? So usually a lot of communities, their number 1 need that they say is because it's the first thing that comes to mind, even if the community doesn't need it, is homelessness. That is simply a go-to answer. We need to help the homeless. I planted a church in Laurel, Maryland. We had 0 homeless women and 7 homeless men in the whole region. And that's because those 7 men didn't want help. They didn't want to have homes. They were offered them. There was a coalition of churches, they called it LARS, a coalition of churches that had wiped out homelessness. And yet still, when I go and ask people, a lot of people said, well, homelessness is our greatest need. Well, that's why I always ask the second question. Do you know anybody meeting this need? Because I want to find out if it's really already being taken care of. Third question, if they're engaged, if they really seem to be engaged in the conversation, then I'd just say, hey, would you be interested once we get started reaching this community this way? Would you like to partner with us in this? And then sometimes people will connect with us. These surveys are difficult. I'm not starting it myself. I have a pastor that I'm coaching that's starting a brand new Chinese church in Rockville, Maryland. Large Chinese population in that region. We have one Chinese church, but we need 2 more, really, to meet the needs of that population. And he just came out of seminary. He's very introverted and was very scared when I told him this was the first step. Very scared. So I kind of talked him through it, and now he's met over 400 Chinese people. And many of those are coming to his house every week to just connect. He's building these great relationships. He's ready to build his team. He's done a fantastic job. And that's really hard to find because he's not just looking for anybody on the street. He's narrowed down to just one type of person, Chinese. So he's been very, very effective. First time I tried this with a church in Sofia, Bulgaria, one of the worst places in the world to plant a church. You'll be very thrilled that you don't have to plant a church there because the Orthodox Church has a stranglehold on that country. You can't plant without their permission. It's against the law to rent to any other denomination besides the Orthodox Church. Very, very tight controls. And I asked them, this is the first step, and they said, we can't do that. Everybody here is like atheist because of communism, trained us to be atheists, or they're Orthodox, and they think that we're some kind of cult. Nobody's going to talk to us. And I just said, I'm not going to coach you if we don't try it at least. And I said, in 2 weeks, I want you to come back and you give me at least 10 people you've gotten responses from. I don't care if it takes you 300 people to talk to. I want you to get at least 10 responses. And so got back on the Skype call with them, and 2 weeks later, they were all smiles, so I knew something good had happened. They said that they had gotten 112 responses. And actually 12 of the 112 said they want to join their new church already. That church, when it launched, was one of the largest churches in the Union from day one. And so it's very effective when you get to know the community. Yes?
We've got a question here from someone watching the live stream.
Okay.
Wants to know who it is that you survey.
So anybody and everybody. Good question, whoever you are. Thank you. Yeah, so the question was, who do I survey? I survey anyone and everyone. I go to businesses. I go to the police office. I go to fire departments, teachers, business owners, people on the street. I love if there's laundromats. I love those because people are stuck in there and they can't get away from me. I go to grocery stores, parks. It depends on the community. If it's a place you can go to door, I'll do that. Whatever it takes to find people. It's not that hard. People are everywhere. You can find people. And if you have people helping you do this, this goes quickly. I suggest you at least talk to about 200 people before you make a determination. So you've got to be very careful when you're doing this that you don't slant the answers to something you think it should be. Like if you're very big into the health message, don't slant the answers. People are saying, I don't know. What about health? Oh, yeah, health. We need health. Don't do that kind of thing because then you're slanting the answers, away from what may be reality. Just ask the question and wait for them to respond. Some people just don't know. Some people will tell you, I'm not interested, leave me alone. I've done this door to door. I've had a couple of doors, not very often, but a couple of times doors slammed in my face. Those things are just happened. I mean, it's nothing compared to what Jesus and the disciples went through, so we've got it made. It's easy here. But we want to make sure that we're connecting with people. And if we don't understand the people, then we're guilty of creating a church that benefits us. And when we understand the needs, then we can meet the needs in the best way that we can. If the greatest needs are, there's a heavy opioid addicted area that we're planting in, we know that we're going to be creating ministries that help people who are coming out of that or whatever the process that we are capable of doing. If we're in an area where single mothers is the greatest. The greatest right now, the most unchurched group of people in North America is single mothers. They are the most unchurched. And so some communities you'd find a heavy single parent area, maybe that's a ministry that you do. It depends on where you are and the community. But we're trying to develop a church that's going to meet the needs of the people there, just like Christ's method alone tells us to do. If we do it like a lot of church plants do, I imagine if Jesus did it that same way. Like what if Jesus decided he was going to do things the way he liked to do them? Like blind Bartimaeus comes up. And what did Jesus say when blind Bartimaeus finally walked up to him? You know what he asked him? Yeah, what would you have me do? And Bartimaeus said, what? I want to see, right? What if Jesus would have said, you know what, wait a minute, I've got something for you. Hey, Thomas, come here. Bring that water over here. I know you can't see this, Bartimaeus, so I'll tell you what's happening. This is water. Here, taste a little bit. That's water, right? Yeah. All right. Now it's wine. Here, taste that. You have a great day, Bartimaeus. And walked away. I mean, he performed a miracle. Yay. But it's not the miracle that person needed, right? So often we'll do ministries in a community that we like doing. But it may be like number 17 on their lists of needs. Instead of actually learning about the people, who are they? When we develop a church, it should be for the people that are in that community, mingling with them so that they can find Jesus. Be confident in our relationship with them so that they can find Jesus. That's how Jesus did it, and that's how we want to do it as well. All right, so questions on this one? Good. I like this one, no questions. We'll keep going.
What's kind of your opening line when you knock on the door and they come, and what do you say?
Everybody's different. It depends on who it is. I've been doing this for so many years. I've got a feel for people right away. But usually it's something like, hi, my name is Pastor Steve. We're starting a brand new ministry to serve this community. The problem I have is I don't know what the community needs. What would you think are the greatest needs in this community? So something like that. Yes?
Steve, I remember some meetings ago hearing about Adventist Health coming out to communities and surveying the community. Yeah. Is that applicable here? Or
It sort of is. It can be used. So there's a lot of stuff out there, tools that you can use. There's Precept that has tools. The problem with the Precept tools is they're old information sometimes. And the hospitals are coming at an angle from a hospital's point of view. They're not necessarily they're looking for health issues, mental health, even spiritual health in Adventist hospitals. Each hospital, by law, has to do a health survey of their community. So if you're in an area with a hospital, it's a good tool, but don't rely on that only. Yeah, good question. Any other questions? All right, let's continue then to step 2. So once I know now what the greatest needs are of the community, now I need to know what kind of church am I going to be. You can call this your mission, your vision, but both mission and vision usually actually develop out of core values. Core values are what is the core important things to us. Core values guides how you behave within the church as well as how you interact with the world. It's who we are, not necessarily as an Adventist church, but who we are for this community. We know we're an Adventist church already, but what makes us unique, a unique Adventist church for this community? What are we going to do to serve this community? What is the core of who we are going to be? And so I like these a lot better than long mission statements, but those work as well too. You can do it however you want. But they determine a lot about what you're going to do. So once you understand what your church is going to be like, what our core values are, then you can start using that as a litmus test for when you're creating ministries and systems. Does it fit with our core values? Let me explain a little bit more about this. When you know what kind of church you're going to be, your values, it helps you keep things streamlined. You'll come up with a vision or a goal, and the actions and methods you use to get there, your values will help keep those in alignment towards your goals. It's kind of like having a riverbank. The water keeps flowing because the riverbank is keeping it from just spreading out everywhere and doing nothing. It has movement forward because of the riverbank. The values aren't going to get you to where you want to go. It's going to be your actions and the things that you're doing as a team. But they're going to help you stay focused. So I kind of look at it this way. Every church is doing stuff. All churches are doing stuff. And I don't know this church, so it has nothing to do with, I'm not talking about this church in particular. But all churches are doing stuff. Some churches just do stuff, and it's like turning on a spigot at your house and just letting it run. What does it do? It's not very effective, right? It just makes a hole in the ground or a muddy puddle, depends on where it's at, right? Now, some churches realize that there's a harvest, that Jesus has called us to go out into the harvest. They still just do stuff for themselves, but they at least know that there's a harvest. Not any of the water is going from the spigot to the harvest. But then in some churches, there's maybe one or two people that say, we got to start doing something. And so they start running over to those actions and getting a handful, running over to the harvest and throwing some water on, running back, getting a handful. Not real effective, but at least a little bit is happening now, right? Now, some churches, they get a group. Maybe a small group starts working together. Maybe they have a personal ministries that's able to attract a portion of the church. And so that's more like filling up a bucket and running and throwing it onto the harvest. The actions that they're doing, they're starting to make a little bit more impact on that harvest. But a church that has core values, that is actually a mission-driven church, the way Jesus called us to make churches, is more like a church with the hose hooked up. They can actually get the actions pointed towards the harvest so that the fields grow and they become ripe, and Jesus harvests a mighty harvest. Does this make sense? So core values, let me give you a little more insight in what they are. This is your handout as well. Core values, there's different kinds of values that people get mixed up, so I want to explain these real quick. There's a thing called gateway values. Gateway values are the things that everybody shares in common. Every single Adventist church has the same gateway values. So that would be our 28 fundamental beliefs, right? We all have those. That's not core values. Core values are what makes you a unique Adventist church for that community. But we should all have the same gateway values. And you're not going to be able to have, obviously, an Adventist church that says, hey, the Sabbath is Wednesday, and we have pork barbecues after the service. You're not going to be an Adventist very long, and of course you wouldn't. So everybody has the same gateway values. That just allows you to even begin the process of being a church. Core values are, why are you unique? Like this church. One of the unique things about this church is it serves an academy. So it serves young people. That's not every church is like that, right? You have a very wonderful mission in this church. That's beautiful. So core values are different. I'll give you a couple of insights to that. What is the thing that Walmart is known for more than anything else? Prices. They're low prices, right? You know what core value is Walmart's number one core value? Low prices. They say it right on their website. Low prices. That's just who they are. So core values are actually things you can recognize. I would know what a core value of this church is just by coming to the service today. It's something that's easy to see. So when you're creating a core value in a new church, it should be something that's evident. We are here to serve whoever. Some churches, they're here to serve themselves. That you can see that in their core values, in how they act and react within themselves and the outside world. This church is serving an awesome purpose for the young people in the academy, and it really makes an impact. If you plant another church in another community, there's going to be another need there that you're going to be serving. And so core values help to identify that. Target values, these are usually called aspirational values. If you've ever read Peter Lencioni, he talks a lot about aspirational values. This is where you create a value that's not really obtainable. We are the friendliest church in the world. Well, how do you know you're the friendliest church in the world? Have you been able to measure yourself against every other church in the world? Maybe you are a friendly church. Often I find people who say we're the friendliest church in the world means they're friendly to each other, but not to outsiders. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's the case. But it's not really, it's a goal way out there that you don't have any way of actually obtaining. Now, there can be target values that you can obtain. You're just not there yet. It's not who we are. But we might be able to get there someday if we continue to work in certain directions. But those are goals that are future targets or impossible to receive. Unintended values. So let me give you another example. Anybody here ever shopped at Nordstrom's before? What is Nordstrom's known for?
High prices.
Customer service, and one other thing. Quality, that's it. Customer service and quality. If you look at Nordstrom's core values, what do they say? Customer service, quality goods. But an unintended value is what you just said. When you have very great service, you have lots of staff. My wife, we're not rich by any means, I'm a pastor, but at Nordstrom, she has her own personal shopper, which is free. People don't even know this. But she would call up and say, Lauren, I'm coming in. I need, a couple of outfits. She was a realtor, so I need a couple of outfits for spring. And Lauren had come to our house and looked in her closet at everything my wife had. So she had it all written down. And when my wife would show up, Lauren would have like 7 or 8 outfits laid out, ready for her when she got there, and saying, this would go good with your black skirt, this would go good with this, you've got these shoes to match this. It was all laid out for her. That's insane service. But you have service like that and really high quality goods, you end up with, say it out loud again, high prices. That's their unintended value. An unintended value is usually a negative result of your core values. So Walmart, low prices. What would be a negative of Walmart?
Little service.
Yeah, the customer service is horrible, right? They're understaffed. They don't train their staff because they're trying to save money so that the price of goods is less. So when you're going into Walmart, you're trading. You're trading good service for low prices. They have 5,000 checkouts there and 2 of them are open, right? That's what you usually see at Walmart. And deception values, that's not really a church thing. That's more of a politics thing usually. It's where you say it's one thing, but it's exactly the opposite. You label it this, but it's really this. Maybe Westboro Baptist Church, they've got, some of that stuff going on. If you know who they are, but anyway, it's not important. So that's what core values are. Core values can be very simply stated. I had a church where we were serving young adults who were leaving church. And we were planting a church for that community. And when we surveyed them over and over, we kept hearing certain themes. And so one of the things they said is, that, that people just don't accept us. They don't listen to us. They don't care about us. We've been in the church our whole lives and nobody even notices or pays attention to us. So our first core value is we're going to be accepting. Second thing they said is, I feel like I'm going in, a lot of people are saying, I feel like in the churches that I'm in, they're just, everybody is dead. It's like there's no life in that church, or it's super boring, or there's nothing. And they said, when I read the Bible, Jesus is exciting. He's not boring. And so the second thing we had, our second core value was we're going to be exciting in the sense that God is exciting. And then the third core value that we had was they said that churches are filled with hypocrites. You've heard that one before, right? Yeah, I always say when somebody tells me, you church people are all filled with hypocrites, I say, don't worry, there's room for one more. You can join us. Because we're all hypocrites in some form or another, right? And so, but we said we're going to be real then. So that's what's going to be unique about our church. We're going to be accepting. That doesn't mean we're going to keep you where you're at. It means we're going to accept you for who you are and let Christ change you. We're going to be exciting. We're going to show who Jesus is in a way that makes you excited about who he is. And then we're going to be real. We're going to tell the truth. If we have failures, we're going to tell you about them. We're not perfect humans. So that's an example. You could have stuff like that. All right, so questions on core values. Any questions? This one's not as fun, I know.
What's a good number?
3 to 5. Yeah, it's got to be memorable. When I do coaching, I usually coach for 3. When you target 3 things really well, that you do it exceptionally well for that community, it usually makes an impact. Yeah. Yes?
Compare core values of a sponsoring church to the new church. Are there often a lot of overlap? And how does it work if the new core values meet that constituency of the new population are so different?
Right.
There's a disconnect between people that are attempting to serve.
Yeah, so, yeah, the question was, is there a connection between the core values of a sending church and the new planting church? Maybe the sending church has people that are fitting this mold, but they won't maybe fit the other place, right? We'll get to that question partially more as we go on. But the other thing is that if the communities are identical, then the core values might be identical. But the odds of that happening are very small. You're not doing a multi-site. So if multi-site church is where a church doesn't plant another church, it plants another worship service. That doesn't work really well. I mean, it's a lot of work. It's very, very time-consuming. Only in that case would your core values be exactly the same, or in the case of having exactly the same kind of community, would your core values be the same? Yeah, good question. Any other question? All right, let's get to the next one. Know your goals for members. This is a big one. Whether you church plant or not, this one is a big deal. So let me ask you real quick. We have our head elder here, and I don't want you to put it on the spot, but I'm going to anyway. We have a couple of the pastors. Tell me the number of disciples you have in this church.
Potential?
No, the number. Do you have a number? Don't worry about it, because I hear that answer all over the world. Exactly. That's a problem. By whose definition? We are called to go make what? We're called to go make disciples. And I ask this question around the world. How many disciples do we have? This isn't an Adventist issue. This is a Christianity issue. This is something that for some reason, we've forgotten that Jesus actually asked. We haven't forgotten because we preach about it all the time. We preach about it, we talk about discipleship. And some churches actually have a discipleship, something for getting people, praise God, because most churches don't have that at all. And then another question you have to ask is, does your church actually have a clear path? If a member comes in, do they know the pathway to becoming a disciple? Because Jesus said, go make disciples, right? And so, if we are actually going to make disciples, what does that look like? Well, what Shane said just a second ago is what definition? I think the reason why churches are not more intentional about creating disciples is because they've never defined what a disciple is. What does a disciple look like? And all you have to do is go into this really cool book. There's a book that explains what discipleship is. It's called the Bible. It's awesome. And spend some time looking at what a disciple is. I've been doing this with people for a while. This is a hard step. But if you don't do this before you plant a church, trying to implement it after the church has gotten started regularly is very, very difficult. I don't know how many churches I've talked to who've tried to implement a new discipleship process only to be frustrated by it because it's not gaining traction, because it hasn't been built into the culture from the beginning. Now, that doesn't mean that disciples aren't being made in churches. I believe disciples are being made in churches. I just don't think it's as intentional as it could be, and thus it's not as effective as it could be. What if we intentionally defined what a disciple looks like biblically, and then came up with a way to help people get there when they come into our church? Does that make sense? Because Jesus said, I want you to go find disciples. Is that what he said? No, he didn't say find disciples. He said go make them. So what does it sound like? What if I said go, is it different from if I said, I want you to bring me a car, or I want you to make me a car? It's totally different, right? So if I said bring me a car, you could just go find any car, drive it to me. But make me a car is a very intentional thing. You have to have kind of a blueprint to know how to make something. And luckily we have the Holy Spirit guiding us through this process. So I'm not asking you to copy what we do, but we have come up with what we understand a disciple looks like biblically. We have other churches that have done this too. Theirs look a little different. That's okay. The main thing is you have a working definition of what a disciple is, and then a process to help them become a disciple. So for us, we found that there's 3 things common in disciples biblically. One is disciples are mission-minded. They actually care about the mission that they're on. That Christ has sent us to go do something very important. And so that looks like these things. Go evangelism. Mission-minded people are actually on mission wherever they go. As they're living their life, they are a missionary for Jesus wherever they go. They also have a servant's heart. Jesus was the ultimate servant, right? Yes or no? All right, he's the ultimate servant. So if you have a servant's heart, you'll be much more like Christ. And then here's the hardest one for Adventists typically. Not all Adventists, but if I have pushback, it's usually this one. And we already talked about it a little bit before. The next person culture. We are the church. Biblically, we are the church. The church is not for me. I am, with Christ the head, part of a body serving this world. Thus, the church is for those who don't know Jesus. What did Jesus say? I came to seek and save the lost. We love that save part, right? The baptism, praise God, baptism's awesome. But the seek part, that's the tough part, right? Actually going out there, getting to know people, building friendships. It's sometimes difficult. So the first thing we see is they're mission-minded. The next is they're growth-seeking. We believe that the disciples are people who want to grow. They want to grow closer to Christ. They want to have a spiritual growth daily. They're building that relationship. We also see growth seeking as part of excellence, living a life of excellence, not perfection, but excellence, doing our best for Christ. I have seen churches, and you've seen churches, that it's almost embarrassing. It's almost embarrassing the things that they're doing because they're not giving their very best. It's like, people just show up that morning and say, well, what should we do today? And that's not good. That's not what we should be doing. We should be giving God our very best. And then, of course, they want to grow others, so they're disciple makers. And then the third thing we saw is that they embrace community. They want to be part of community. You know, Jesus, when he prayed for unity, we read it in the book of Luke, he prayed for us, this people at this time. And what did he pray that our unity would look like? Do you know that prayer? It's freaky. It is unbelievable. Jesus prayed that we would be so unified with him and one another that he compared it to his unity with the Father. That he wants us to love each other so much that we become one, just like Jesus is with the Father. How many gods do we serve? Wait a minute. Jesus, Father, Holy Spirit, that's 3, isn't it? But divine love has such incredible power that we have 3 in 1. We only have one God. Divine love has that much power that he is actually one God. And he says in his prayer that we are supposed to love each other so much so that we become one, just like that. That means you are truly my sister, and I love you. You are my sister, and we are to be one. You, sir, you are my brother. I love you. We are one. We are to live in that kind of loving relationship with one another. And that's what Jesus prayed for. I want to answer Jesus' prayer. How about you? I mean, Jesus answers my prayer all the time. What if we answer Christ's prayer and actually love one another that way? So that's what a disciple would look like. Also, they small groups. Now, that could look different for every church. In our churches that I plant, you cannot become a member if you don't join a small group, period. Because you're never going to build relationships if you just listen to me preach at you. You've got to find a way. But we include our Sabbath schools as part of that curriculum. So if you want to, be part of a Sabbath school group where that's interactive, that's great. But we had so many different small groups going around that help people grow and flourish as a family so that they could build relationships beyond just coming to church a couple hours a week. And then another thing we did to help foster this community is we did ministry in teams. Jesus sent people out 2 by 2, right? He didn't send people out alone. So every ministry didn't have just one person in it. It was always a team working together. And they actually created kind of a small group approach to how we did ministries as well. So that's the things that we saw. And then we developed a process to help people grow in each of those areas so that they could flourish and become much more like Jesus every time. All right? So questions on creating a pathway to discipleship, making members become more and more like Christ. So can you see the power of actually defining what a disciple is and then helping them grow into that? So everybody who came into our church would know what it takes to be a disciple of Jesus. Instead of just baptizing them and saying, you're on your own. And I'm not saying this church does it, but a lot of churches, that's what they do. It's baptism and you're done. They don't have a process to help them grow strong spiritually, strong, effective missionally, and all these other things. All right, any questions? All right, good. Let me take a drink of water and I'll keep going. All right, so step number 4, the proposal and information sheet. This is the most boring step. So if you're going to take a nap, go ahead and take a nap now. After lunch nap is a good time, but it's a very important step. So once you've done those first 3 foundational steps, you notice that I didn't even talk about building a team yet, right? I haven't even talked about a team yet. We're actually learning about the community, developing our core values, understanding how we're going to make disciples, and I do that before we start trying to gather a big team up. You might be doing this with a small team who's going to be leading this. Some pastors will do this on their own. Some lay people who are going to be planting churches do this on their own. That's fine. We do this so that we have this foundational stuff laid out first. And so then we create basically a blueprint. Now we know those things about us, the community, how to build our core values and make disciples. I'm going to write up a blueprint of what this church is going to look like. And I actually create a proposal. It's usually anywhere from 7 to 15 pages. It's got maps about maybe where we're going to be, what it's going to look like to grow as a disciple. And on this website, cpexchange.net, there's a couple of examples of what that looks like. It's so many pages, I didn't want to print those out for every single person. But you can get that on there, and you can kind of get a view. Tim Matting does, he's in our conference at Beltsville Church. He does the very best proposals I've ever seen. Professional, and I actually have one here in my bag over wherever it's at. I can leave for your church if you want to look at it as you're preparing your church. But a proposal and information sheet. So a proposal is a very detailed step-by-step. We use it for a lot of different reasons. Why do we create it? I use it for the conference. One thing I love to have is the conference really excited about my mission and vision. So this may sound boring right now, but Tim Matting doing a church plant from Beltsville into D.C., one of the things the proposal does for you, you know how much money he has for this church plant, not including a salary? You're going to be sick. You're going to be sick. $655,000 raised for one church plant. Proposals help you raise a lot of money. If you do them well and you have the passion to grow something, and we're not trying to plant just one church in D.C., we're trying to plant a movement in D.C., and so that money is going to be used to help expand this greatly. That is a huge amount of money. We've got money from the GC, we got money from the union, we got money from the NAD, we got money from his church, from private donors, and the pile just keeps growing. And one of the biggest reasons is because he's created a very, very good-looking proposal that's very clear, and people give to vision. They want to give to vision. And I've gotten notes from the GC. So the GC is funding this conference more than any other conference in the NAD. We've been able to get 2 major projects this year where most conferences have 0. They're funding 2 major projects. The union just sent me a note saying we're giving almost half of our funds to this conference out of our whole union because we have a vision. We know where we're going. We give them very good proposals. So it helps you in that way. It also helps you when you're talking to other pastors in the area. Maybe you're talking, maybe you have a Sunday church that's like very against what you're doing. We give them their proposal, and it usually calms them down. Maybe you have a council member in the city. We just brought this proposal to the mayor's office in D.C., and they were excited about it. You can use this in so many different ways that helps your church in the future. So it's worth the time spent to make a good proposal. Information sheet is just a summary, a 1-page summary of all of that. And I've kind of given you a sample of that. Let's see here. I've got too many things here in my hands. Let me put this back down. This example information sheet, I took this. This is not exactly what I would give, but it's pretty close because it's got some directions for you on here as well. But it's just a little summary sheet of what our church is going to look like. And I use that for recruiting. Now, if I have really analytical people that want to see tons of information, I'll give them the full proposal. All right? So questions. We're getting through the first 4. These are the tough ones. It's all that foundational work. Have you ever seen a house be built? You know, that digging the hole, laying the pipes and all the stuff, pouring the footings of the cement foundation, whatever it's going to be. All that stuff, none of that stuff's glamorous. That's what we just got through. Is we want to build the foundation of a new church very well. If the foundation is healthy, the church is far more likely to be healthy. Yes, sir, do you have a question?
Yes. Why do you need so much money?
You don't. I'm not a fan of a lot of money in church planting, honestly. I'm not a fan.
What do you do with the money?
They're going to build a lot of churches. Yeah.
Just for the building?
But, in D.C., the rent, what it costs to rent a place in D.C. is astronomically. We have a little church in Silver Spring, Maryland, which is not even in D.C., but it's near the border of D.C. It's a small church. They rent to a Sunday church for $7,000 a month. And that's not even in D.C. Once you get into D.C., the rents skyrocket. So a lot of it is just to be able to afford a place to even meet, to be able to reach the people. So we need more money in a big city like that for rent. And once in a while, like I just came from New York. It was so hard to plant there because the prices are just crazy. I mean, D.C. is high, but it's really high in Manhattan area. So we had to figure out, churches were meeting 3 or 4 churches in one building. Well, we don't even have buildings to meet in D.C., and not enough buildings to meet in. So, yeah, it's going to be one of those things we're launching. But we're also, I don't know if you heard this, but the Howard University Hospital System has just given over direction to the Adventist Health. So we'll be directing it, and for 3 years it's a trial period. After that, if it looks strong, then it's likely that we'll be changing the names, perhaps even purchasing, maybe they'll be purchasing those.
Maybe NASCAR, if they'll win, instead of having a wreck.
It's wrecking.
Advent Health was one of the main.
I know, I saw that, yeah.
The Daytona 500.
Right. But, having hospitals there and no churches, I mean, that makes no sense. How do you have Adventist hospitals? And they're building another hospital in D.C. So we're going to have 3 Adventist hospitals in D.C. and almost no church around that area. I think there's a Spanish-speaking church in one of the areas, but very, very little representation in a city like that. But you're exactly right. When I personally plant churches, I want to do it with a shoestring budget because I want people to be able to do what I do, multiply. Never going to get $600,000 for every church plant. That doesn't make sense. So I agree with you. But I'm not turning it away either. I mean, we'll use it. We'll find a way to use it. I'm not planting that church, but I'm helping them. All right, any other questions? All right, let's continue. Now, you notice we're all the way to step 5 before we start talking about actually building a team. So all that other foundation stuff helps you to build the right team. So a lot of churches just say this: anybody who wants to join, you should join. What is some potential dangers of doing that? Give me some feedback. What do you think?
Differing opinions.
Yeah. Different values, yeah. Very true. Could be, yeah, you never know. There's a lot of different things. I wrote these, and there's probably many more. Have you ever met anybody who wants to control churches? Man, church plants draw those kind of people out, that they think they want to be in charge. And it's really not because they're more holy or spiritual, just because they like being in charge. And you'll find people who are drawn with that type of personality to this kind of church because it's smaller, it's new. Maybe they tried to control another church and people saw through them. They weren't able to do it. Here's my chance. It also, people with problems with the Adventist church, whether it's our doctrines, our leadership style or systems, whatever it is, people with real issues in the Adventist church, they like to come to new churches because they think that I'll convince this group. And maybe we'll build a church around the way I think about this thing. Also, people who have a personal agenda. I don't know if you ever had this at this church, but there are some people that do, that people have their own agendas. Maybe they want to do something that's nobody else thinks is a good idea. I'll get this, this is what I want to do at the new church. They'll let me do it because they need people to help them, and they'll let me do it there. But most of the people are really good, strong, loving, solid Adventists They just have a different value than what we need at that new location. They're much more, they more fit maybe in a different setting, and they can't see how we are going to serve a different community. So, if we have a lot of different values in a new church, you're not going to start out as healthy as you could. So we see this all the time. And a lot of these things take down new church plants. New church plants have a very low survivability rate. I don't know if you know that, but most church plants fail. But there's a lot of things that we can do to make them healthy from the get-go. Most church plants in Adventism don't fail. We have some things in Adventism that nobody else has. But there's even more we can do to make them healthier and stronger from the beginning. And this is what I look for. So when I am doing building a church plant, I actually interview. I call it interview, but it's not really an interview. I just talk to people. I sit down and I start talking to them about what this new church is going to look like. The type of people we're serving, how we're going to make disciples, what does it look like to be a member in this church, anything that might be something that we should be talking about. We go through it, I ask questions, I get to know them, and I'm looking for people who want to do these things. They don't have to be perfect. I'm not looking for people who are strong disciples necessarily yet, but I have to see that they want to grow in these areas. And these are the areas that I want to see that they want to be on mission with this church. They want to grow and they want community. And I look for red flags. So a red flag might be, like when I'm planting a church, I usually do what's called a parachute plant. So I don't have the benefit you have here of a healthy mother church planting a church. I go into an area where there is no mother church and I plant it myself. And so I'm looking for things that might be tells that people are consumers. I'm not looking to build a consumer mentality church. And so things like, they'll ask me maybe, like, what kind of music are you going to have? And I always say, well, why do you ask? And they might have a very good reason for that, but sometimes they'll say, well, I won't go to a church. It's not like X, Y, and Z. That might be exactly the kind of music we're going to have, but I still won't take them because they think we're building the church for them, that their needs are primary in this church. That's not what I read in the Bible and in Ellen White. Their needs are not the primary. The lost are what we're supposed to be doing. Jesus left the 99 in the pen to go seek that one lost. We have to have that same kind of mentality. That we are thrilled that we have saved members. We'll nurture them and build them up in mission. As they are on mission with us, they will grow as disciples. So we look for that kind of thing. They say, what kind of children's ministry do you have? Why do you ask? And if it's very self-centered, then I know that that's somebody who thinks they're here to be served rather than serve. So I go through this to make sure that our core team, as you mentioned, we want to have the same vision. We want to be going the same direction in this community. It's very important. So let me explain my interview process and what it looks like. I will call somebody up, and I'll meet at Panera Bread. I hate coffee with a passion, but if Starbucks is the nearest place, or if it's a McDonald's, wherever I can go to have a place to meet people, because I don't have an office. I'm a church planter. I don't have offices. So we go find a restaurant or a very easy to sit down place. Maybe sometimes grocery stores have a place you can sit in. It doesn't matter where it is. But I'll call up somebody and I'll say, hi, my name is Steve Leddy. We're starting a brand new church. It's like nothing you've ever seen before. I always say that because every church is like nothing you've ever seen before. They're all different. They're all unique. And I say, but we're going to create a church that is here to serve this community. And I don't know if you'd have any interest or not, but I'd love to be able to treat you to a lemonade or a meal, whatever we can afford, and go through what we're going to be doing so that you can either tell me if you know people that are excited, or maybe you'd be excited about it yourself. Can I meet you at Tuesday at 6 p.m. or Wednesday? Does that work better? I always do the salesman trick, give them two options. It's not really a trick. It just helps people narrow down their thinking. Can I get you at the end? Okay. So then we'll meet. And I remember the very first person I met. I remember where I sat. I remember what we were both drinking hot chocolates because it was kind of cold out. I remember everything. The first time I tried this was about 17 years ago. The reason I did this is because the church before that I planted, we went from 40 to 277 in 18 months. We grew so fast. But that core team was always an issue. There was always a struggle because they had people that kept wanting to take us in all these different directions. We had a really significant part of that team that was mad that we were growing because they wanted a little church. I'm like, what are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. They were very much consumers. They could care less about people that we were reaching. And so I just said, we're never going to do that again. And so we came up with this, developed this interview process, and I thought, let's try it and see if it works. Young man sat down across from me. I didn't know anybody at all in that city. It was in Seattle, Washington. I had just moved there. I didn't know anybody in the region that we were planting. And they gave me an associate pastor, but he was just out of seminary. And he hadn't been there in a long time and knew nobody really in that region either. But he had been a coal porter before, and he had a couple of friends that he knew from back then. So we talked to one guy, he was 21 years old, and sitting there, and I started explaining the church. This is what we're going to look like. This is who we are. Get to know him, kind of ask questions. What do you think about this? We went through the process. It takes about an hour and a half. And every single person that joins our team has to go through this process. They have to do this because I have to know who they are, and they have to know who I am. And so after we got through, and I realized this guy is like really talented. He'd won the Seattle Film Festival. He is a really artistic young man. I said, his name is Jesse. I said, Jesse, I know that God has gifted you in incredible ways. Would you be willing to use those gifts to help us build this church and to glorify God? And I remember so clearly what he said. He had a very straight face. And he said, you have my life. And I was like, what? Because it freaked me out. I was like, what? Wow. And he said again, you have my life. And he wasn't joking. Wow. What we found out later is he was ready to leave the Adventist church. In fact, he was ready to leave Christianity altogether. He'd raised in a bigger, actually a church very similar in the sense that it was a campus church with an academy, and they never asked him to do anything. He had been there 21 years, all these gifts and talents, and he's just been forgotten. And his friends were starting to become Druids because it was kind of cool. We're Druids. And so he was going to go join the Druids, a pagan religion. And because nobody seemed to care about him. And when he heard that he could actually be used in Christ's church, he was thrilled. He quit his job and got another job so he had more free time. And he was giving us 40 hours a week to help us build this church. We trained him how to do these interviews. He started doing interviews. I mean, the things that this guy did. Eventually, he and his wife were so on fire for Christ that our conference hired them to plant another church with no schooling. None. No college education. They were just so effective at ministry. That's what happens when you interview people. Not just do you find out the right fit, but you can light a fire under people for Christ. The passion that you have to serve that community will be contagious, and others will want to be part of that as well. And so that's what we did with Jesse, and over the course of about 4 months and a week or so, we interviewed over 200 people. And out of those 200 plus people, we picked a core team of 77. And how do you get that many people when you know nobody in a town? Well, this is how we did it. After every single person was done, like Jesse included, we would say this. Like with Jesse, I'd say, I'm really excited. I'm really excited about the possibility of you joining our core team, but I'm not going to invite you to it. Because the Bible says that God builds his church. And so what I'd ask you to do instead is, would you pray for the next week and make sure that God is okay with this? Because I want to make sure that we are the right fit in his eyes. And I'm going to call you in a week, and if God doesn't tell you that he wants you to do something different, then we'll celebrate together and we'll be in a core team together. But would you be willing to pray for a week? And then the second thing I say is, the devil just heard our conversation, and he does not like what he heard. And he's going to attack us. He's going to do everything he can to stop us. So would you please, every day, pray for it. Pray for this new plant and all of those that are involved. We need God's protection. And then the last thing we'd ask is how we grew so fast. We'd say, like with Jesse, I'm brand new. I just moved to Seattle. I don't know anybody. I was lucky to get your name. And now you know what kind of church we're going to be. Certainly you know people that you think would be excited about this kind of church. Would you please, let's pull out your phone and kind of go through that list and see who you think would be really excited about at least learning about this. And we did this with every single person. So the first 7 people we got, we asked them these questions, and they gave us names. Then we did a sit-down interview with them, and then they gave us names. And then they gave us, we actually tracked it. We went 11 generations deep and ended up talking to over 200 people and ended up with a core team of 77 in less than 5 months. So most churches are like, well, we can get a core team of 20, we'll be blessed. Now, I will tell you this, and if you freak out, you freak out. I don't care. We also had non-Adventists on our team. We had an atheist on our team. We had a Muslim on our team. And I loved it. Why? Well, I will tell you this, that I actually never wanted to be a church planter. I didn't want to be a pastor. I wanted to be a missionary. That's my heart. I wanted to be a missionary. And I was learning, preparing to go into the mission field. Mission directors kept telling me the best work you can do as a missionary is to train a local that knows the customs and the culture in that area and let them lead the church. And then they will build the church. And I thought, wait a minute. I'm in a mission field, and I know the culture of North America. Why don't I just be a missionary right where I'm at then? And so I am a missionary. Church planters are missionaries. And when the first missionary came to this region, how many Adventists did they have on their core team? I mean, just when you're a missionary, you don't start with a bunch of Adventists. You know, you go into a different country, you're not expecting to have a big Adventist core team come with you, right? And so a church like this that's sending a core team, you're blessed. You're blessed. But I love to have people who are not Adventists on my team because you know what? They will be Adventists by the time we start. We will win them. And they know we're starting an Adventist church, so it's not like a ton of atheists are jumping up and down saying, I want to join your church. It's usually people who are connected to have a good friend or family member who's joining our core team. They give us their name and they say, yeah, I love what you're doing for the community. I'd like to try that. And it doesn't take long until they become Adventists. We work with them, not only training them in the core team, but we begin to do Bible studies with them too. And so quickly we grow that way as well. So later I'll show you kind of how we, if I can get my thing to work, it stopped working here. Oh well. So any questions on that part? Yes, please.
So that was my question.
Okay.
Was about whether they were believers or not.
Yeah.
You were interviewing people.
Yeah, I never even asked people, are you Adventist or not Adventist? Because we do a reaping series right after we launch, and we're surprised how many people that we thought were Adventists were not Adventist. because they were great friends, and we didn't know them. They were connected to this group of Adventists, but they just happened to be friends. We didn't know that they weren't Adventists. Now, most people we knew one way or the other because they would tell us, but we had several people that we just didn't know. And so, but it's exciting. It's really exciting to see and work with the actual harvest. Building a church from the harvest is beautiful. Yes?
So just so that I understand that component,
Mm-hmm.
how does sharing the same core values,
Mhm.
gateway values, the same goals play
Mhm.
into that component?
Yeah, so we're actually developing a team that will share those. Yeah, so he asked, how does, if you're having people that are not Adventist or even, they don't even have to fully grasp the core values to be on the team, but they have to be willing to grow that direction. We explain what they are, and they can't have reservations. I don't like this. I don't want to see a church like this. I don't want you guys to go that direction. This is the way church should be. Da-da-da-da, all those things. Those are the people we're not interested in. Of those 200 and some people, we did a core team of 70 some. Most who were not picked was because they self-chose not to be part of it. I really like my own church. I'm not interested in it. And it's nice when you ask that question, too, because then people are kind of weeding people out that wouldn't be interested in it from the beginning. You're asking, who do you know that'd be excited about this kind of church? So most of the people we talk to, even if they were not Adventists, they're excited about what we're trying to do. And we'll grow them, and the next step is talking about that. We'll grow them to live out the core values as well. That's the process of training. So, but a very good question. Yes, sir.
Do you tell them that you are a Seventh-day?
100%. Tell them we're Seventh-day Adventists. We don't try and hide anything about what we're doing. If you do that, they're going to get mad at you later if you say, oh, guess what? We were Seventh-day Adventists. Surprise.
You tell them your beliefs?
Yeah. I mean, they don't even care about our beliefs. That is, especially more and more we get in this postmodern, metamodern age, they just want to know you, not your beliefs. They want to know you more than anything else. And so once, just like Christ's method alone, once they develop a relationship with you, then you tell them your beliefs, and they're right on board. But if you shove their beliefs first, then they're like, I don't know you. Who are you? And that's actually the way that Jesus did it. We call it the new way, but it's actually the way that Jesus did it is more effective today than maybe in any time in history. The way that Jesus did ministry, mingled with the people first, sought their good, met their needs, built confidence, then said, follow me. That is exactly what the new generations go for. They want to know you before they know what you believe. And so we build a relationship with them. And then there's some people that'll drift off, once they
have your testimony.
Yeah. You need, there's a lot of different, everybody's different. Some people just, I want a friend. I don't have anybody. And they're so attracted to a group of people doing something in a common cause. Some people are seekers. I mean, there's the range is so wide. So everybody's different, and you have to deal with everybody as an individual. There's not one way that we want them. But, I mean, we have so many people that most Adventist churches would have written off. I mean, I was one of those people. Nobody would have thought I could be an Adventist. Nobody thought I could be a pastor for sure. The way that I lived my life. It was so far from Christ. My mom was ordained a witch right in front of me. We tried all these crazy religions. I was DA's top 10 list. I mean, why would I be a pastor? But a loving pastor who was not a good speaker brought me to Christ. And that's what it takes. We need that kind of church that loves people. Loves people. Christ's method alone. Not trying to do it our way, but God's way. Yeah, good question. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Any other questions? All right. Yes, please.
Well, I was just wondering, maybe as Adventists,
Mm-hmm.
we've not done this a lot, so when you do plant a church, are you seeing that people are able to assimilate to the Adventist belief and core belief system? Are you finding, sometimes today we see churches that are kind of falling off one side or the other of the core Adventist beliefs?
Yeah, so that's actually not a hard problem at all. When your church is on mission, beliefs are the easy part. It's when your church is not on mission, the beliefs are hard. When you're actually on mission, the beliefs become more of a natural part of who people are, because it's very tough to be a disciple without being on mission. You can live 28 fundamental beliefs as just a head knowledge, or you can live it as a disciple of Christ. And so when you're making disciples, the entire process is making disciples. It becomes much easier for them to assimilate into the church. And we're never perfect. Nothing's perfect. We have problems. There's problem people. I baptized a Baptist pastor. I had to ask him to leave eventually because he just couldn't fully grasp our doctrines. And we left as friends. We're still friends today. I did his wedding. He got married, and he asked me to do his wedding. We love each other. We just can't be in part of our church because he just can't accept all of our beliefs. But so it doesn't happen 100% of the time, but usually. Let's see. I had a hand right here, sir. Yes. Oh, okay. Is it on? Okay.
What do you think about to establish a social community service before establish a church?
If it's one of the primary needs of that community, that's great. If it's not, it's like when I planted in Bellevue, it is one of the richest cities in the world, and it wasn't a great need in that area. But if I plant in an area that it is a great need, then that's a great way of doing it. Yeah. So everything is about serving people and what their greatest needs are. So, but thank you. Good question. All right, let's continue because time's flying. Yes. Oh, sorry.
Does need to be a unity in these members, that they start going, they need to have the same core values?
Not
How
from
you
day one. They have
convince
to be
me?
willing. So what I'm looking for is people who are coachable, want to grow in these areas. They don't have to be perfect in these areas because we don't have that many people who are perfect in these areas. What we're looking for is people who are excited about the possibility. And so we actually, in the next step, I will tell you exactly what we do to help them so that they get there. But that's a good question. Thank you. Let's keep going because our time is flying by here. And so let's go to the next step, training your team. All right, so we have another handout for this one as well. By the way, that one that says your response, we'll get back to this one here in a second. This is just kind of the same thing we did in the surveys. So training your team. This is very, very important. We have been, I think this is one of the most, I don't know how to say, I don't want to say too negative, but one of the reasons that so many churches have a hard time planting is they don't do this well. We spend a ton of time before we start developing people so that they're, like you said, they have unity, they're on mission, they're ready to make more disciples because they've been discipled. And so this step, I'm usually spending 7, 8, 9 months, however long it takes, before we open the church, training the team, building that core team up and training them in these 6 areas. I train them on how to live like a disciple. So obviously, if they're a Baptist, or if they're a Muslim or whatever it is, an atheist, an agnostic, and they're on our team, this is the first thing we work on every meeting, how to live like a disciple. And then the second thing is how do we grow together as a spiritual community. Both those things, if they don't want to have anything to do to Christianity, they would have left. So they're obviously, if they're not an Adventist, they're still hungry for truth. Because these are the first two things we cover every single meeting. How do we grow spiritually? How do we live as a disciple? The next thing we train them is how to be a leader. For me, this is so important. We don't do this enough in our churches. And I'm not talking about how to lead a ministry. I'm talking about how to lead in life. How do you lead your family? How do you lead in the workplace? How do you lead in the church? How do you lead in your community? How do you actually be a leader in this world? And I am so blessed because when I was 14, even though I had that young adult walk-away period, but when I was 14, we were in a Pentecostal church, my 7th or 8th different kind of religion my mom thought was cool and weird. We came to a Seventh-day Adventist meeting. She thought it was weird. Look at these people. They have like a dragon on this postcard. And I want to come check out this weird thing. So we went to these meetings, and for me, I was hooked. Because I had been seeing preachers who were, they'd be drunk and smoking. And for me, even as a kid, I was thinking, this does not compute. It seems weird watching pastors getting drunk, smoking. They'd be talking about their life experiences and never using the Bible, and in Pentecostal church, they're forcing me to talk in tongues. So I said, okay, Scooby-Dooby-Doo. There you go. Because it just didn't feel real to me. And so I watched a pastor begin to use the Bible to explain the Bible. And I was hooked. And the rest of my family quickly faded away, but I was hooked. And this church trained people to be disciples and leaders. And it was amazing. Immediately, they made me a Pathfinder Junior Director. And so I was put in charge of part of the Pathfinders. And then they made me a Junior Deacon. And that meant that I actually had the keys to the whole building. And this was in Colorado. And I would, my family wasn't coming. So I was riding my bicycle 10 miles from my house to the church and 10 miles back. And if it was snowing and I had the keys in my pocket, I had to be there first, riding my bicycle through the snow. 15 years old or 16 years old at that time, riding my bicycle, opening the doors, turning on the lights, turning on the heater. It was my turn to close. They handed me the keys. They didn't ask for excuses. They were loving, but they expected you to lead. And I led in the the youth programs. They taught me how to teach. I was in a youth choir. We had a youth drama that went around to prisons to help prisoners. And we went to other churches. We had also recreational stuff, basketball, volleyball. There was many weeks I was riding my bike from my house to that church 5 times a week. There was so much stuff going on. And they helped me grow. They put me on nominating committee. All these, not that I was thrilled about that, but they just gave me a lot of stuff to do, to train me how to lead. We went on to Walla Walla. My wife went to school there at Walla Walla. I was too poor, tried to get in. They said, you don't have any money, so you can't come. So I got a job at a Pizza Hut, part-time, cooking pizzas. And I remember the first day they taught me how to make a pizza. It's really tough, dough, sauce, cheese. And then they went and had a meeting. And they said, if it gets slow, we want you to clean up the kitchen. And so they went and had the meeting. When they came out, they said, what happened? I thought I was in big trouble. And what happened is they were surprised how clean it was. And so I cleaned this make table, the walls, the oven, the floors. And so in their minds, that must mean I would be a good manager. So they made me the lowest level manager. I don't know if you ever experienced this in your lives, but I was a shift manager. So very low level manager. But this pizza had a training program for all the new shift managers. There's about 50 of us in the state. And we had a 2 or 3 day training program. And during this program, they kind of outlined, they said, eventually we're going to pick the five that are showing up, show the most promise, and they're going to be the leaders of other teams. And so we started talking, and it became clear that I knew a lot about leadership. And so I became one of the 5. And I was leading a team, and we were doing very well. And then each of the team leaders had to give a speech on a very powerful topic. I mean, hold on. Why is it important to make pizza? Wow. But I am not kidding you. I promise you this is real. There were people who were crying when I spoke. Because I said to myself, I'm not just going to talk about how to put toppings on. I'm going to go deep. And so I said, there are families in this world. The mom is working all day. The dad is working all day. The kids have all these things going on, homework and sports, and it's like the family has just been totally separated now. And they have this hope when they walk into your restaurant. They're going to reconnect. And they're going to find a place to rekindle that love as a family. You're doing something for them much more than just feeding their stomachs. You're feeding their lives. And, and so I won this thing afterwards. It was like the most inspirational leader thing. And I'm only telling you this because of the next part that's coming up. I'm not trying to brag, but the next part that's coming up. The owner of that Pizza Hut, the whole area, he came up to my wife. She came to pick me up. And he said, "Who is this guy?" She goes, "What do you mean?" He's like, "He's 21 years old, right?" "Yeah." "How does he know how to lead like this?" And she said, "His church taught him." That is powerful. His church taught him how to lead. That guy quickly made me a manager. We became the fastest growing restaurant in the entire nation that first year. So then they put me in charge of all the restaurants in the region. I had over 1,000 employees. Why? Because my church taught me how to lead. It makes an impact in their lives. Not just kids, everybody. When we teach people how to actually grow, then that is going to they're going to have much bigger impact in this world. And they're going to make a bigger impact on lives. So we've got to start teaching people these things. This is what we're called to do. It's part of discipleship training. Jesus didn't make just followers. The disciples led the mission forward. Very important. We also train them how to make an impact in the community. This is our community. This is our needs. What are we going to do? We take them out and show them how to change lives in the community. We train them how to run every single vital ministry. Not just the ministry they may be serving in, but all ministries that are vital to the church. Why would we do that? Because I expect that some of these people are going to be planting churches someday. They're going to be leaders. One of the reasons that they promoted me so high, not just because of my growth in those restaurants, but because I use this same God-given principle in business. I trained every employee how to do everything in that restaurant. I trained the dishwashers how to write a schedule. I trained the cash register people how to hire and fire. What do you do in the process? Not that I'd let them hire and fire, but I showed them how, and they'd sit in with me. And pretty soon, all the area restaurants were being run by people I trained. And so they said, well, you might as well just train everybody, and promoted me even higher. I was 23 years old at the time when I had 1,000 employees working for me. Because of these principles, we want to set up our core team members, our new church members, to have that kind of impact. Where not just in the church they can make a difference, but everywhere they go, in their families, in their communities, in their work, everywhere. So we train them to run all these ministries because I expect that they will be doing what I'm doing then. They'll be planting new churches because we're never going to get this work done if it's just pastors. It's just never going to happen. It's got to be strong lay leaders running this thing. And then I explain every step. While we're going through the church planting process, I tell them every week, this is why we're talking about this. This will prepare you in the future to plant a church if you know how to do this. All those things. All right, questions? Any questions? All right, good, because we've got to run through these next ones. Yes, sorry, go ahead. Oh.
You talk about all this different kind of training.
Mm-hmm.
When does this training take place?
Good question. So I meet with my core team once a week. It's a night that fits best with the majority of the people that we've chosen, and it lasts for 2 hours. If you bring me back for if this church wanted the 8-hour training, we'll go through all of this in great detail. I'm skipping a ton of stuff, but basically we have a half hour of eating and an hour and a half of training. Yeah. All right. Good question. Good question. All right. Next one is build your impact ministries. Before you ever launch a service, launch your ministries. Does this make sense? Let me explain why. Let me go back to my Pizza Hut days. So I actually one of my main jobs was to become a Pizza Hut planter. That is exactly what I did. I would go around to new communities and learn and open new stores. Now imagine if you were the crew of a new Pizza Hut and it's the day before opening and I say, all right, you're going to be a cook, you're going to be a waitress, you're going to be on the telephones, you're going to be a delivery driver. I mean, that would be a horrible business plan, right? You got to actually train people and test, make sure that they know what they're doing before you ever open the doors if you're going to be an effective business. We have so many church plants that don't do this, that just open and think things happen naturally. It's not wise. I went to a church plant, and it was so bad. I'll get into that later, though. Remind me about that one. Oh, man. It was so bad. But we actually want to build the ministries that are going to impact our communities before we actually do them. So children's ministries, we start doing stuff for the kids in the community before we ever open the church. Greeting, I train my greeters how to greet when we come into our core team meetings and any other type of things we do, so that they're trained, efficient greeters before we actually start ever doing worship. All the key ministries, you have to be running well before your grand opening. Worship is one of them. We practice worship. What does it look like to worship well? Greeting, children's ministries, small groups, community outreach, all of those things. Very, very important. Train your people, then launch the church. Does that make sense? All right, any questions about any of those? Let me give you a quick overview on the greeting one. So we don't believe in doing things the way every church has done them just because that's all the way it's always been done. We challenge our people to a much higher level. So let's say you're my greeting leader, and you have a team. I would tell you and your team, this is your team here, your job as greeters is when somebody new walks into our church, within 10 minutes, they never want to go to another church. How are you going to do it? Happy Sabbath. Here's your bulletin. Is that going to be enough? What if you put a big smile on your face? Is that enough? No, it's got to be more than that. So we developed 3 levels of greeters. We have outside greeters that help with just general stuff. And again, if you bring it back, I'll go into painstaking detail on all this stuff. We have more of an inside greeter, but they're looking for new people. And then they hand the new people off to our 3rd level greeters who are there just for new people. And they get to know the people. They hang out with the people. They connect the new people to other people in our church. They build relationships with them immediately. We had a conference that did a secret shopper of every church in our conference. They hired these seminary students from a Lutheran seminary. And they said, here's a list of, I can't remember, it's like 4 pages of questions. We want you to go in there and tell us what you see. And most churches were they had it ranked on a 0 to 100. Most churches were getting anywhere from 30 to 60. And there was one church that got 100. And it was our church plant, because we were prepared for that person. We knew what to do when somebody who was brand new walked in the door. And on the bottom he wrote, I am studying to be a Lutheran pastor, but my wife and I are going to start going to this church. So when we say anybody who walks in that's new, within 10 minutes, we don't want them to ever want to go anywhere else. With our children's ministry, we tell them, we want you to do such an amazing job with the kids that they love it so much that they will drag their parents out of bed to come back the next time. And we had so many parents say, we just got back from a trip, we were so tired, we wanted to sleep in, and our kids just drug us out of bed. We're like, praise God, that's working right. So we train our members how to build ministries like that. All right, the 5-month pre-launch process. There's a handout. I don't know how exactly it didn't get printed, but that's okay. There's a handout on that website that has this in detail. This is a very technical thing, so listen carefully. I know that we've been going long and my voice is getting weak and your ears are getting weak. But this is just a powerful thing. Once you build your core team, you're getting them in the training process, you're feeling strong, then you look about 5 months in the future for a grand opening date. Now, you're still going to be training your core team every week. It's not going to change. But now you're going to be adding some new stuff. And this is usually when I tell my core team members, by this time, you should be shedding most of your ministries at the mother church or wherever you're going to church at. Because you're going to be doing things twice a week now. It's going to be very intensive 5 months to prepare us to get this thing going right. So we have two different things now. A core team is basically the people who embody the core values. You're teaching them to embody the core values. They're becoming disciples. Most of them are going to be leaders in the church. Not all of them, but most of them. And so they are kind of like the DNA of the church. Now you're going to be building a bigger body that's going to help you start the church as well. But they're going to be trained not by you, but by the core team. And we call them the launch team. And so we do every single month, we have a cycle for 5 months. And this is what one of the cycle looks like. We have week 1 of the month. We have what's called an information meeting. It's just like doing a interview one-on-one, but now we're doing it in a group. And we tell our core team members, invite everybody you know now to this one. And we just explain in a public venue now, this is the kind of church we're going to be, this is the things we're going to do. And at the end, we give them this your response form. You already have one of those. And they can respond the way that they feel appropriate. Will you pray and see God's will about this? Will you add this to your prayer list? And who do you know that should be added to this? And we want to get these back from them so that we have their contact information. So we do that information meeting. And then the next week, what we tell them is, at the end of the information meeting, we say, guess what we're going to do next week? We're going to have a social. And we're not going to pretend that it's a religious service and not pretend it's a social and stick religious service in there. It's just fun. We're just going to have fun, and we're giving everybody here 10 invitation cards. We want you to invite everybody you know to next week's social. And it can be anything you want that's not like, don't do a movie. Nobody talks in movies. Don't do rough sporting event. People get hurt and mad at each other. But stuff that's social. We love to do, picnics. We love to do different game nights, different things. I am horrible at planning socials. I've got other people who know how to do that much better than me. I'm not kidding. Our church, when 2000 came around, they put me in charge of running the New Year's Eve celebration for year 2000. Everybody left by 10. I'm not kidding. That is not my gift. I am horrible at planning these things. So use your gifts in your group that somebody knows how to do that. But have a fun social. Sometime during the social, you interrupt it. Just say, hey, real quick, everybody having a great time. Yay. Guess what we're going to do? We're going to do another one of these in 2 weeks. And everybody's excited. Yay, it's going to be free. We're going to have food, all the stuff that you bring. And we're going to give you all 10 invitations. Invite all your friends. We want this to be a big, big bang. So invite everybody you know. And by the way, next week we're going to try something different. A lot of the people that are hosting this really want to serve this community. And the way that we're going to do this is we're going to start a brand new church like nothing you've ever seen. But we want your feedback. So we're going to have a practice, and we want to hear what you think about it. And so we'll give everybody 10 invitations to that as well. At the socials, you always give invitations to 2 things: the practice service and the social. Because a lot of people who come to social will never come to a church event, at least not yet. So if you don't invite them to the next social, you'll never see them again. So the next week we have a practice service. It is exactly what it sounds like. Some people call it pop-up services. But basically, it's just a church service before you have an opening. It's to practice and do things well. We did this in Pizza Hut. We gave coupons to people in the community and said, come, let us practice on you. Come and order. We'll give you a free pizza. We just want to practice. But we do everything shortened, especially the first 3 of these. We shorten things down. So instead of maybe 6 songs, we'll do 2. And then after the music's done, the worship leader will get up and explain, why do we do music in church? What are we trying to do? How are we trying to connect to God? And we want your feedback. Does this make sense of what we're doing for this community? Let people ask questions and answer questions. And then we do the same thing with a sermon. 8-minute, 10-minute sermon, very short. I get up, did that make sense? Were we talking in a way that if you don't understand the Bible, you at least understood this message? Was it clear? Did it challenge you to do something in your life? We ask a lot of questions and get a lot of feedback. And when you do that, the people who come to these things, they feel like they have, and they do have, some ownership in this new church. This feels like my church. It's really important. Like our Chinese, I keep saying our Chinese church plant because I'm so excited about what he's doing. He's been talking to these 400 plus people, and he's got all these people he's meeting with. We said, you need to come up with a church name so that we can open a bank account for you, because you're paying for all this stuff out of your own pocket. And so instead of just coming up with yourself, why don't you just gather a bunch of these people together and talk about the kind of church you want to be and let them help you pick a name. And because that group helped them pick a name, they are solidly on board for this church now. They weren't that interested before. But now that they have an ownership piece in that church, they helped pick the name. They came up with the name. It's really morning glory, but it's not like the flower. It's a different name in Chinese. I don't even want to try and pronounce it. But it means a lot to them. And it was really cool. So we have a practice service. At the end of the practice service, we also have the same response form. And then we say, next week we're going to have a what? Social. We give them what? 10 invitation cards, really well made out, that talk about where it's at, and ask them to invite who? Everyone you know. Good. Somebody's listening. I like it. You do this because your crowd will keep growing and growing and growing and growing, and you'll reach new people all the time that you never knew existed on this planet. You'll reach so many different people. Not all of them will stick, but many of them will. They'll get excited about what you're doing. And so you've gone from your core team to now expanding. And so it looks like this over the 5 months. You repeat it over and over and over. We don't do this on Sabbath. You could do the practice service on Friday night if you want. But we do these during the week. And we don't need to necessarily have a certain place to do them until you get to that practice service, not the last one on the top, but the second to the last one on top. You'll see that there's a practice service, and then the last social is replaced by another practice service. We do those 3 practice services on Sabbath at the location where we're going to be renting. And we practice the same service 3 times in a row before we have a grand opening. And we'll explain why we do that in just a second. So what do you see we do more than anything else? Social. Why do we do so many socials? Exactly. What happens, especially in a church like this, if you take a core team over to another community and they plant a church there, within about a year, they start drifting back to the original church if they don't build relationships. And you're building relationships with a lot of people who don't know Jesus. They're very, very important component of planting a church. We had a church plant that launched with 313 people. He only skipped 2 things. He didn't do enough socials, and he didn't do the next step. And he asked me after the service, actually his wife asked me, what's going to happen in a month or in a week? And I said, I don't know, but I'll tell you in a month. You're going to be down to 125. She said, what? Why did we fall that far? And I said, well, you didn't build relationships amongst your core team, doing the social stuff. And then 2, you didn't do what I'm about to show you next. And in 1 month, they were down to 112. They were shocked. They'd lost over 200 people in 1 month. And it's because there's a process, there's a thinking, a logical thinking into the process that helps you gain a very strong and healthy crowd. All right? This step alone will triple the size of your church. If you do this step right, it will triple the size of your church. I've seen it over and over and over again. Core teams with 30, 40 people launching over 200 because they use these steps. All right, any questions on this one? Yes. Wait for that. Yeah.
So all those events that you mentioned, the informational session, the socials, not necessarily on Sabbath.
Definitely not on Sabbath.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, we don't want them on Sabbath. You can have the last 3 practice services on Sabbath. And you can do the first practice services on Friday night, but don't do them during church service time. Yeah. Good question. Any others? All right, we're coming there, getting there. 9. Sorry, this takes a long time, but great grand opening. This is actually a process that will help you keep the crowd that comes. Most churches are very good at bringing a big crowd, but they don't know how to keep the crowd. So the first thing is market. Get anybody you can to come to your opening service. It's very important. Flyers, the core team and launch team, they've been given now. They get 25 invitations every time we do a meeting at the end. We want them to be inviting everybody they can. We actually train people how to bring people to these things. So people, it's not that hard to bring a crowd, but how do you get them to come back? So I'm going to tell you my story about the worst church plant I'd ever seen. Not an Adventist church, thankfully. I was living in a community. I'm a church planter. I got a flyer in the mail for a new church. You know, this is starting on Sundays. I said, I want to go see what they're doing. So I walk in. It's at a school right next to me. I walk in the front door, and there's nobody there. And I'm like, did I get the wrong date? What's wrong? I saw one of their signs out front. So I start wandering around this big school until I found them. They were in the cafeteria on the other side of the school, even though the only entrance is at this front door. No signage at all. I walk in like 5 minutes before they're starting, and they're still setting up, rushing to set up. And I see them put these 2 big trash cans up on the platform that they had and a piece of wood in front of it. I was like, what is that for? Why would you put that up on a podium, or up on their stage that they had? Then they had the children's story, and this guy did a puppet show by himself with 2 puppets behind these trash cans, but you could see him the whole time. It was really poorly done. Wow. But the kicker, the thing that shocked me, this was their grand opening week. They kept talking about, this is our first week. And then the pastor got up and said, we're now in our 2nd week of our sermon series, and he named the sermon series. He was in week 2 of his sermon series on his grand opening week. It was like they never thought about people actually showing up to their grand opening, it seemed like. It was really poorly done. I noticed those signs did not last long at that location. So we make sure that we have a different kind. We actually have a sermon that is about how to reach the community. And I use a sermon about blind Bartimaeus. And I talk about all the things that were happening around Jesus at the time. and Bartimaeus screaming for mercy. And then I talk about how Jesus did the most important thing that I read in the Bible that makes me understand who God is more than anything else. He stopped. And that just is amazing. That he would stop even for a beggar. And then I start talking about how we are called in this community to be people who stop for others. That we're not going to let the busyness of this world, the chaos around us, distract us from stopping and helping those people who need help. We're going to be there to serve them too. We're going to be there to serve them too. And then we begin to talk about each of the ministries. And I explain how the key ministries will be used to serve that community. What are we going to do to serve that community? And each of the team leaders I'm going to introduce. So it might look like this. Well, let's say you had a church like this. That Come Follow Me it might say children's ministry. And this one might have a different key ministry, hospitality, whatever the key ministries that are needed for that community. You might have 4 of them, you might have 6 of them, don't do many more than that. But what we do is we explain how each one is going to help this community, and we introduce the leader of the team. So I might say, Richard here is in charge of our children's ministries.
Is this during the sermon time?
During the sermon, yeah, during the sermon. And I say, Richard, do me a favor. Would you stand up? Everybody wave at Richard, tell him to thank you for the ministry that he's willing to help lead. And we talk about how it's important. And then we talk about how it's important. And then Richard quietly walks over. And let's say now this is the children's ministry banner. And he just stands by it. Doesn't say anything, he's just standing there. Then we go through every one of the ministries that are the key ministries that have a banner with the name of that ministry around there. And each of the leaders introduced in the same way. We explain how they're powerful ministries for the community. And the leaders go stand it. At the end, we don't do a lot of the postlude stuff. We don't have a closing song or those types of things. What we do is we ask the congregation to go and talk to the ministry leaders by their different banners. And so we've trained all of our people to get up when we say go. Our core team and our launch team, when we say to go, they begin to spread out to these different areas. And all of these visitors follow suit. That's the human nature. You do what everybody else around you does usually. Now some people leave, of course. Now what happens when they come? So let's say I'm Richard standing in front. I'm in charge of the team that does children's ministry. I have 2 assistants here as well. And we're asking people to help us in that ministry in very simple ways. We might say we need people to help us put crafts together. They're not even going to come into the children's ministry. They're just going to be creating crafts and making them at their house and then bringing them back. Very simple ministries. Every one of the ministry leaders is going to be doing the same thing. Getting people involved in a very simple way so that they can have ownership in that church. And it also helps that leader then will begin developing a relationship with the people who sign up in their group. So again, if you ever want me to come back and do this in detail, I'll explain exactly, step by step, how that works and why it works so well. But it captures what we call the looky-loos. When you do a new church plant, people come to look. They want to see something new and different. What are these people going to be like? And usually they have no thought about sticking around. But if you do this, you bring many of them, they start coming back because of that. All right, questions on that one? Let's do the 10th step. You ready for the 10th step? You've had your grand opening. You've done all these other things. Now we do it all over again. Step 10 is multiplication. And this needs to be the mindset while you're training. We are not planting a church. We're planting a movement. We're planting a movement. We don't want to plant just one church. We want to plant a movement of churches. We want to see this thing grow. And we do this at the very first service. We say this when we take up our offering at the grand opening service. We say we are so excited to have a church that loves this community, that's going to serve the needs of the people in this community. But there are so many communities out there that are not being served, that don't have the hope that we're going to be bringing to this community. So today we're going to take up an offering for the next church that we're going to start in a new community so we can share this good fortune with others as well. So we actually start taking up offerings from the very first week for the next church plant. And every 6 months, we take up that same offering, always keeping in focus that we're going to be planting another church, that this is not the end of the game, it's just the beginning of a movement. All right? So multiplication looks like this, and this is what we train. Members are trained how to bring in new people by developing relationships with them. Leaders are trained to make new leaders. Disciples are trained to make new disciples, and churches are trained to plant new churches. This is God's process of multiplication. But the first and most important step for organic multiplication and church revitalization is this one right here. You've got to obey God. God is calling us to be multipliers. We have to say yes to Him. All right, any questions?
Is that another thing that God meant when He said, "Be fruitful and multiply"?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess a little bit. That's part of multiplication, right?
Yeah.
Can you repeat the question?
He was just joking. Yeah. He was saying, be fruitful and multiply. Yeah. So. All right. Any other questions?
What about the physical plant?
Oh, good question. What do you do with the physical plant?
Yeah, is that like a tent or just out?
Oh, man.
Where,
Tent.
where do you mean?
Yeah. Boy, if I could get a tent. She asked, where's the physical plant?
How do you do that?
It's wherever we can find. Usually it's a school. I find a lot of schools, but it's so much easier for Adventists because we have so many churches that meet on Sunday. You can rent their churches.
You try to rent them rather than
Oh, I never have built a church. Never. I have no desire to do that. Not that it's wrong. I just don't want to do it. I don't. Because our churches grow so fast. You know, if you do this, you're always multiplying churches. The church you're starting, you might, what if you rent a place that seats 100 and you have a grand opening of 300? What do you do? So I like renting because it's much more fluid. You can change as you grow. And like I love renting at colleges if you can, because college students will come in as you're doing services, and they're like, yeah, you could do it anywhere. I mean, I don't know about James Madison. I have no idea, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know any of the schools yet. But some schools will let you, some won't. You can do them at high schools, elementaries. The main thing is, are they going to let you meet regularly every Sabbath and not going to keep kicking you out? High schools are really tough because of that, though, because they kick you out a lot. But find a place. There's places. You know, a lot of churches try and rent a building 24/7. I never do that. I rent on Sabbath morning only. And then everything else we do is in homes. Prayer meetings in a home. Ministries are done in homes. Everything's done in homes. It just seems more organic for me. But you can do it however you want. There's no wrong answer to that one. But that's a good question. All right, any other questions? All right, checkout time. So what this is just, if you could, we're just going to go around real quick. If you don't have anything to say, don't say anything. But what is one thing that you think you're going to be taking away from this today? And we're going to start way over here, ma'am. What is one thing you think you'll be taking away from this today? Just real fast, though. Yeah, one thing that you think you'll be taking away from this. One thing that's helpful or whatever you want to say. Yeah, nice.
And the responsibility that you take in order to follow what you have to do in that day.
Amen. Perfect. All right, let's keep moving up. We're like 10-second answers at most. Okay, yeah, you can pass too.
I think it's really important what you were saying about building relationships. I think that is a really important thing to grow, to be able to grow the group.
Amen. Amen.
The fact that Adventists have so few non-Adventist friends.
Yeah.
That's shocking.
Yeah. It's surprising. Sad. Yeah.
Take that inward focus that we used to what we're supposed to really be doing,
Yeah.
which is going outside.
Amen. Amen.
Well, just your first slide, what he spoke about, that we don't, as Adventists, we don't have non-Adventist friends, and we don't even attempt to make non-Adventist friends. That's pretty shocking.
Yeah.
But true.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I'm very skeptical. And how are we going to instill in these people, the Adventist doctrine, the true Adventist doctrine? Because right now in the Adventist, is infiltrating all kind of doctrines. Okay? When you're going to go with a new church into the Adventist, in the fundamental, traditional Adventist doctrine of the church?
Yeah. So
When?
you're asking a question or you just
Yeah.
make a statement? Yeah, it is, every person's different, but everybody's going to get it. So it's not like we have a plan, but we don't say everybody grows at the same rate. Some people, from week one, I begin Bible studies with them. Some people, it takes them a year of being in relationship with them before they're ready because they're so far from Christ. And we actually have a full training on how to do that too. Because most of the people that we reach in the Adventist church are what's considered -1, -2 on a spiritual scale. We show you how to meet people all the way for -8s, -7s, but I don't have time to explain that. But that's a good question. Every person's unique, but we're always going the same direction you're saying. We don't want to create an Adventist light church. I don't believe in that. I believe in creating a very centered Adventist doctrinal church that's preaching both the message and the method of Adventism. So, yes, sir. Go ahead.
I like the invitations and invite your friends.
Yeah, very important.
Just reminded of the transformational power of discipleship and training people to be leaders.
Amen, amen.
I don't know how to say it exactly, but the consumerism, like it is really easy to go to a church and expect something for you, or to judge a church because they don't have what you like. And I think it's important to be reminded that that's not the point.
Amen, amen. Right next to you there.
The same thing Pastor Reed said about training people in leadership, and like when they get baptized, not to just leave them, but to like put them in leadership positions and help them grow.
Develop to get there. Yeah, good. Yeah, we're here, right here.
I feel like this is really exciting frontline ministry, and I think it's so valuable that somebody has gone before and kind of worked out some of the bugs and gotten it down to a science, and that we don't just have to jump in and hope for the best, but we can have these tools to go on and expect success.
Amen. Appreciate that.
A concept that I got was that God doesn't call us to find disciples, but to make disciples.
Amen.
That's a new concept for me. Thank you.
Yeah, amen. You want to say anything? Yeah.
I was here last evening, and I was so excited when you talked to all of the young people, from the freshmen to the seniors, and the way that they would fit into this church.
Yes.
And that they would not see it as the old traditional Adventist, boring, going to hear more about hellfire kind of a church. And you might explain to the people how your really young people are going to fit into this, because it sounded, I was just so enthused.
Yeah, it depends on every church is different. Yeah. Every church is different. The core team is going to have to decide that. I can't decide if it's a young person's church. But young people have a place in every church, and they should have a prominent place in every church. They should. They don't feel like that, but they should. Yeah, You'd freak out at the churches. I've started churches where you could not be on the church board if you were over 35 years old. Yeah, because our target was young people only, because they were losing them like crazy. But I'm not saying you to do that kind of church. Yeah, but I mean, just saying there's a lot of ways to help build a church strong. All right, hey, I want to thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. I'm going to turn it over to Pastor Shane. Thank you very much.
Can you say amen for Pastor Steve's time with us here? We appreciate it very much. Thank you for sharing. Are you going to be around for a few minutes afterwards if somebody wants to come and ask you a personal question? We appreciate it very much. We want to also thank the Mashburns for their hospitality in putting you up this weekend. We do have a number of you that are watching on the live stream that have been. We appreciate you joining us as well. It's about 44 people are here, I think, total, between live stream and here, which is a good turnout for a Sabbath afternoon, considering all that's going on this weekend. Thank you for being here. Whether you are directly involved in whatever is going to happen in the future or not, my hope is that first box on the card that you will pray that the Lord will bless. I pray that we can all check off that box. I'm excited about what the future holds here. Remember that the business meeting that we're going to actually vote on this is on March 29, the last Sunday of next month. And so between now and then, you're going to be hearing things on Sabbath morning, talking more about church planting, what it means, the blessing it can be for those that are reached and for those that are doing the reaching. And I know that because, Steve, you're not with us, you're in Potomac Conference, Steve is only a phone call away. So we appreciate your willingness to be of help to us, and thank you for being here this afternoon. Would you stand with me, please, as we have a word of prayer? Father in heaven, there is no denying the fact that you have called us to reach other people for you. We believe, Lord, that your coming it's the greatest event, Lord, that we could possibly imagine. And yet right now we know that there are thousands of people in this valley within easy driving distance of here that are not ready for that great event to happen. I pray, Lord, that you would bless us. Send us your Holy Spirit. Give us your wisdom. Give us your discernment. Give us your passion and your love, Lord, that we might be able to do your will here in this valley. Thank you for these things, God, and we pray them in your name. Amen. Thank you for coming.